Up for the newsletter at signup.axios.com. My question of the day for Republicans and Democrats in Washington: what are you going to do today to prepare for the possibility that President Trump is going to undermine the results of our election? We'll see what they start to say over the next 24 hours. That was way too early for this Wednesday morning. Morning Joe starts right now.
I want to get our hands around a very difficult situation.
All right, Donald.
Hey, Joe, one other thing.
Donald. You got to let us ask questions. You can't just talk. No, you got to let us actually ask questions. You're just talking. All Muslims. Donald. You're not going to keep talking. We will go to break if you keep talking. We're going to ask you questions. All right, go to break. Go to break, everybody. Go to break. Go to break right now. We'll be right back with more Morning Joe.
Yeah, note to moderators who actually want to moderate a debate that makes sense, stays organized, and keeps both candidates in line. That's one idea. Cut the mic and mean it. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Wednesday, September 30th. Along with Joe, Willie, and me, we have MSNBC national affairs analyst, co-host of Showtime's The Circus, and executive editor of The Recount, John Heilman. Co-founder and CEO of Axios, Jim Vandehei. Politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University, politics editor at The Grio, and an MSNBC political contributor, Jason Johnson. And historian and Rogers professor of the presidency at Vanderbilt University, John Meacham, will join us in just a moment. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was something.
What was that?
Well, it was, again, what we've seen for 4 years. It was a president completely ignorant of or uncaring about the position that the United States has held on the world stage over the past 240 years, and also, Willie, ignorant or uncaring about the power of a president to send out a message to America that we are an exceptional country. I mean, you think about the fact that during the height of the Cold War, actually nearing its end, Ronald Reagan would talk about freedom in the Soviet Union, and dissidents locked in gulags thousands of miles away from freedom would find out about the American president's words, and they would tap in code what the president said while locked in their jail cells, and hope would spread throughout those gulags. That's what the American president's words are supposed to convey, hope. We're supposed to be a city shining brightly on the hill for all the world to see, whether it's from Ronald Reagan or inspiration from John Kennedy or FDR or Lincoln talking about the last great hope for a dying world. That is what our presidents are supposed to appeal to. And last night, you had a president shaming himself, bringing shame to anybody who still supports him, and actually giving hope, to racist, anti-Semitic groups.
Stand back and stand
telling
by.
them to stand back and telling them to stand by, sending messages to his supporters, telling them to disturb and disrupt voting, trying to threaten those who were going to try to vote peacefully, and also making such a mockery of American democracy by screaming and yelling during that debate and being completely unmoored emotionally, philosophically, intellectually, that, again, he has brought even greater shame to this country and has made the American democratic process look like a joke worldwide.
Well, we've worn these adjectives out over the last 5 years, but that was truly disgraceful. It was truly embarrassing. It was truly pathetic. It was truly chaotic. And I want to point out that clip that we bumped in with where you cut Donald Trump off. He was on the show in December of 2015 defending the proposed Muslim ban. That's why he couldn't answer a question that you were asking him, so we had to go to break. Last night, he was there defending indirectly the Proud Boys, telling them to stand back and stand by. The Proud Boys, a white supremacist group. Can you imagine an easier question to answer for anyone, but especially for a president of the United States than, Mr. President, will you condemn white supremacists? He couldn't do it. Reminded us of another campaign moment where he pretended he didn't know who David Duke was 4 years ago. He's given the chance. He won't do it. We know who he is. So there's the spectacle of this, and we'll talk about that, about how ugly it was, just as a representation of our politics, as a display to the world of who we are and where we are as a country. And then there was the strategy. Who exactly was he convincing last night to vote for him, other than his base who's not going anywhere? Who watched that, if there are undecided people? Who watched that and thought, yes, I want more of that for 4 years? So we'll talk about who did well and who didn't, but how could you watch that and want more of that if you're still thinking about who to vote for?
Well, and listen, there's an entire network that is covering this debate as if it was a proud moment for the president. And this situation has gone too far with a bunch of lobotomized hosts and anchors who are just waiting for his phone call. And it's pathetic. Here is the moment when you think about that. And if you think you want to debate that, here is the moment where the President of the United States refused to denounce white supremacist groups, opting instead for language many considered to be a call to action. Take a listen.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland?
Sure,
are you
I'm
prepared
to do
specifically
that,
do it?
Well,
go ahead, sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call them? What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys. Stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left-wing. This is a left-wing problem.
White supremacist. Antifa's an idea, not an organization.
Oh, you got to be
not
kidding.
militia. That's what his FBI, FBI director said.
Well, then you know what?
No, we're done, sir.
Okay, unless you're a white supremacist, if you took that as a great moment for the president, I don't know who you are. The Proud Boys took the president's words as a shout of support and celebrated it on social media. Within minutes, the group's members were posting on private social media calling Trump's comments, quote, historic. The New York Times reports that some group members labeled it as a tacit endorsement of their violent tactics, while another posted the group was already seeing a spike in new recruits. The group is considered a violent, nationalistic, Islamophobic, transphobic, and misogynistic hate group. According to the Anti-Defamation League, the self-described Western chauvinist organization was banned by both Twitter and Facebook in 2018. Think about that one. And as Willie mentioned, the president's comments and the Proud Boys' celebration of his response is similar to KKK Grand Wizard David Duke, celebrating Trump's response to the 2017 rally in Charlottesville, saying it was why he and others like him voted for Trump in 2016.
What does today represent to you? How you doing? This represents a turning point for the people of this country. We are determined to take our country back. We're going to fulfill the promises of Donald Trump. That's what we believed in. That's why we voted for Donald Trump, because he said he's going to take our country back, and that's what we got to do.
Well, and this is what Donald Trump has done time and again. He did it last night to another white supremacist anti-Semitic group. The Anti-Defamation League came out and demanded that Donald Trump immediately apologize. This is like Charlottesville, which, of course, a lot of anti-Trump hucksters who try to keep their subscriptions up and try to keep their viewership up, actually defended Donald Trump after his Charlottesville comment, saying, oh, he didn't say what the libs are saying, and actually take it, straight from the horse's mouth. David Duke David Duke celebrated what Donald Trump said there. And, you know, last night, I like Donald Trump said, what do you want me to call them? What do you want me to call them? That reminds me an awful lot of back in February of 2016, when we condemned Donald Trump and said that it was disqualifying because he went on a Sunday show before Super Tuesday in 2016 and said he didn't know who David Duke was, despite the fact in 2000 he had condemned David Duke as a racist and said he wouldn't run in the Reform Party because David Duke was a member of that party and he wouldn't be associated with that racist. He also feigned ignorance on who the Ku Klux Klan was. And so here we are, 4 years later. He's still doing it. Oh, I don't know who they are. And then refusing once again to condemn an anti-Semitic group, a racist group, a group of white supremacists. Again, nothing new, but he did it on the world's biggest political stage last night. And all those anti-Trumpsters who have shamed and humiliated themselves during his presidency, once again, forced to confront the fact that they are supporting a man who will not condemn white supremacy in America. I await the Wall Street Journal editorial page's condemnation of this continued nod and wink to racism.
Here's your chance.
And in fact, John Heilman, Donald Trump telling them to, quote, stand by. Stand by while trying to undermine American democracy by calling into question the legitimacy of our voting process, following all the other attacks on our democratic process and how he will not respect the results of this process. This, of course, amounts to a five-alarm fire for democracy. But I'm just curious in general, speak to that, but also speak to the debate last night. And though we really can't analyze this like we would analyze any other political debate in American history, talk about the political consequences of this for the two candidates.
Right. Let's just start with this. So the debate obviously was a debacle. There's only one. I heard lots of people calling it a crap show, using other language, over and over again last night, is suggesting somehow that this is sort of a thing where both candidates created a spectacle and that debased thing. And this is an act of violence against the institution of the presidential debates. This has been a ritual that we've observed in a relatively dignified way on this stage, this debate stage, on television since 1960. And the president basically decided to take the form and break it. Back in 2016, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, the president did a lot of unconventional things in 2016, but more or less tried to, he lied and he misdirected, he attacked the moderators, he stalked Hillary Clinton on stage, but he didn't try to break the format. Yesterday, he tried to break the format. It was basically like, I'm not really here to partake in a debate. I'm not here to engage in any way substantively. I'm here to make a mockery of this form. I'm here to fundamentally, profoundly disrespect every viewer. We don't know what the numbers are, but this could have been a record-breaking debate last night. Maybe, I don't know if it's the same as the first debate in 2016. We'll have 84, 85 million people. That's what it was 4 years ago. Can't imagine the number's not at least that high. I'll also say I can't imagine that the number won't be slashed to maybe in half or less for the next couple of debates if we have them. But the president basically, when the president sets out to do something like this, to not just take an aggressive strategy or to try to attack Joe Biden, but to break the format in the way that he did, it tells you a bunch of things, one of which is that he understands that he can't compete if he decides to partake under the rules that were set, right? It's a profound sign of weakness that the president decided and his people decided they would lose if they tried to debate Joe Biden in the conventional way. And so to me, he did. We talked yesterday, again, what was he trying to do in this debate? He's trying to make this election a choice, and he's trying to make it about Joe Biden and then to disqualify Joe Biden. He didn't do any of that last night. He made the debate about himself last night, Joe. And, what do we know about the presidency of Donald Trump. When Donald Trump makes it about himself, he loses. And so I think, you know, the implications are, I don't know if we're going to have another one of these debates. I know the Biden campaign is standing up and saying they're ready to partake, but I don't see how you can go forward to have another debate like that unless the commission, you know, somehow takes control and tries to get the moderator or some to assert themselves in a different way. But I think it was an utter disgrace for the process, but also just a sign of desperation and a huge backfire moment for Donald Trump here. This does not work to his advantage, and everything he did suggested just how weak and just how desperate he was in the face of this moment.
So John, you're so on to something here. Donald Trump acted that way last night because he knew if it were a fair debate, if it were a fair political fight, he would lose. And it reminds me,
just like the election. In
the spring of 2016, I saw the transcript of Donald Trump's editorial board meeting with Fred Ryan in the Washington Post. And I read the transcript and was shocked that Donald Trump went on and on talking about his hands. These are the most beautiful, and just went on and on. They're asking him questions about foreign policy. They're asking him questions about the economy. And I said to Mika after reading the transcript, I said, look how stupid this guy is. Look how clueless this guy is. Mika looked at the transcript, and Mika, you immediately said, oh, no. He knows he can't answer their questions. He knows he can't. He's not qualified to be president. All he's doing is stalling and wasting their time and distracting them with lunacy because he doesn't know the answers to any of those questions because he's so ignorant. And Mika, that's exactly what we saw last night.
Well, and he doesn't want Biden to answer the questions because he will have a cogent answer with historical context and maybe even some experience to go with it. And he didn't want that to happen, so he kept interrupting, he kept poking, he kept trying to get under his skin, going after his son, while Joe Biden was talking about Beau Biden, his son who served in Iraq. He just jumps in randomly about his other son and starts getting deeply personal and mean and cruel and acting, quite frankly, monstrous for the entire debate. And yet, there was no containing this. There were rules to this debate. The candidates agreed to them, and Chris Wallace could not keep President Trump to the rules. It was a you-know-what show. Here's some of that, whatever you want to call it.
All right, gentlemen.
Which was heavily
Mr. President,
you would have been much later, Joe.
Mr. President,
much later.
Mr. President,
you're talking about 2 million people.
You're not President as a moderator.
The individual mandate was the most unpopular aspect of Obamacare. I got rid of it.
I'd like
and we will protect people.
Mr. President, I'm the moderator of this debate, and I would like you to let me ask my question, and then you can answer your question.
I want to make
sure. Mr. President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that. Vote now.
You're going to pack the
Make sure you, in fact, let people know you're a senator.
I'm
not going to answer the question.
Why would you answer that question?
The question is,
radical left.
Will you shut up, man? You've got to provide these businesses the ability to have the money to be able to reopen with the PPE as well as with the sanitation they need. You have to provide them
Nancy Pelosi.
Well, he's just shush for a minute.
I think that the country would be better served if we allowed both people to speak with fewer interruptions. I'm appealing to you, sir, to do that.
Well, and him too.
Well, frankly, you've been doing more interrupting
than he has. That's all right, but he does plenty.
Well, less than, sir, less than
plenty.
No, less than you have. You have repeatedly criticized.
I have to answer his statement.
No, you have repeatedly.
Wait,
you have no, you've been talking back
and forth.
You made a statement. I'm asking you.
I would love to end it.
Sir,
I would love to end it.
You know, if you want to switch seats.
Joe, Biden's getting great reviews. He did great last night. He handled it really well. And when he was allowed to talk, he sounded great. But why in the world was his team expose him to lower himself to a display like that ever again?
Well, Willie and I were talking about this before the show. I would have walked off the stage at certain times and said, until you can actually make sure that we abide by the rules, I'm not going to be a part of this charade. That said, voters overwhelmingly thought last night that Joe Biden won that debate. Donald Trump set himself on fire in front of 100 million people last night during that debate. He turned off women. He turned off independents. He turned off the same suburban voters that are turned off by Mitch McConnell trying to jam through a Supreme Court justice in the dying days of the Trump administration. So they have to debate whether they want to go out and let Donald Trump blow himself up again politically.
Well, he makes a joke of our democracy as he's blowing himself up. So that's the part where if I were the Biden campaign, I'd say we're not doing this to our country.
Well, I think they're probably deliberating over that this morning. I do want to say a quick side note about Chris Wallace. I was concerned last night. I was upset last night about the fact that Chris Wallace was allowing Donald Trump to interrupt Joe Biden so much, especially the first half of the debate. He took more control the second half of the debate. And I'm reminded, as I was sitting at home comfortably telling Chris Wallace to take control, I was reminded of my torts professor, Richard Pearson at the University of Florida, when I was criticizing a response that someone had, that a lawyer had before the Supreme Court on an answer that seemed obvious to me. And Professor Pearson was a big tennis player. He said, "You ever watch the U.S. Open?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Looks pretty easy while you're watching it on TV, doesn't it?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "But when you get down, actually, ground level, that ball's going over 100 miles an hour, and you realize you're in no position to judge that lawyer in front of the Supreme Court or that tennis player that missed a backhand." Likewise, I understand that Chris Wallace last night, Willie, was thrown into the middle of something that no debate moderator has ever been thrown in before. And while it was extraordinarily frustrating, I think all of us need to walk a mile in his shoes before the morning after saying, well, he could have done this, he could have done that. I think it's up to the commission, Willie, to make sure now that they have a candidate that they know is not going to follow the rules of these debates, to either come up with a fail-safe way to make sure that Americans actually can watch a real debate, or just call the other two off.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Wallace has proven he can handle himself with Donald Trump in a one-on-one setting.
Oh, he's great.
It's something else entirely to try to insert yourself into a conversation when he's talking over Joe Biden. But I think you're right. It's on the commission now to say, when a candidate has that 2 minutes, it's supposed to be 2 minutes of Joe Biden speaking alone or 2 minutes of President Trump speaking alone. Just cut the other guy's mic. We don't need to hear the heckling from the other. Now, when they're engaged with each other in that period, you can leave the mics open. And I'm sure all of that this morning will be under review. Jason Johnson, I want to get to you. There's so much to grapple with here. The Proud Boys moment, the president mocking Joe Biden and others for wearing masks all the time. Also, we should point out the president took the opportunity, or actually skipped the opportunity, when given another easy question, to talk to his supporters about not engaging in civil unrest in the days after the election. He skipped that chance, too. What were your broad impressions of what you watched last night?
The broad impression of what I watched last night is that, it would be a mistake, and I'm glad John actually mentioned this. It would be a mistake to just say the whole thing was a mess, because that implies that Joe Biden was responsible for it. Joe Biden was actually trying to attend a debate.
Right.
And it was Donald Trump that was making a mess of it. It was Donald Trump that was failing. And I think that's important. It's an important distinction to make, because if we in the press say that the whole thing was just terrible, that actually turns off the voter, non-voter, right? The people who think the whole process is a mess, the people who say there's a pox on both sides, it plays into Donald Trump's plans to say that everything was terrible. So we got to make sure that we're specific. No, Donald Trump was terrible, and Chris Wallace probably didn't manage the debate particularly well. Joe Biden did fine. You can, evaluate whether he did good one way or another. But I really want to focus, because I think this is why I agree with several other people that there should be no further debates. The idea that the President of the United States, and language is so important, whether or not he condemns white nationalism is an ideology, right? The President of the United States encouraged terrorism. The Proud Boys are a terrorist organization. The president is encouraging terrorism. And what's important about this is you got to remember the entire exchange. Chris Wallace says, hey, will you condemn them? And Trump's like, well, which ones? Which ones are you talking about? And Joe Biden's like, Proud Boys. Well, okay, this, that, the other. think of it in these terms. Imagine if a moderator asked some candidates, candidate X, candidate Trump, will you condemn men who abuse women? And Trump had said, well, what kind of abuse? Sexual abuse, physical abuse? What difference does it make? Why do you need to find out which group of white supremacists to condemn? They're all terrorists. So that's what I got from this. It is dangerous to allow a president to sit in front of 80 million people and the entire planet and encourage terrorism. And if he's going to do that, which he will as we get closer to the election and the numbers look worse and worse for him, it is a public danger. He is a national security risk. I don't want to see any more debates where a president encourages terrorism.
Well, and also, as I pointed out, when he was told to talk to his supporters about not engaging in civil unrest after the election, he said, quote, I'm urging my supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully. This is something that Donald Trump Jr. has been talking about on Facebook as well. We want poll watchers. Go check the polls. Make sure there's no funny business. The president, again, in front of 100 million people, said that last night, too. So, Jim Vandehei, back to our question at the top of the show. Who exactly did Donald Trump think he was appealing to last night? His base is locked in, has been for 5 years. He needs more than that to win another term. What was his strategy last night exactly?
I mean, they had telegraphed it ahead of time that he was going to be savage, and he did. They would think that they can rattle Biden and that would somehow benefit him with moderate voters who are scared or might be worried about violence in their neighborhoods or what might happen if you have a liberal agenda. I think the thing we're missing here, and I agree that the refusal to condemn the Proud Boys as racist and as white supremacist was terrible. In some ways, equally terrible. Go back and listen to what he said about post-election. He made it clear that he's going to force the courts to have to deal with ballots and whether or not they were valid. He has now signaled unmistakably for months on end with specificity that he is going to protest and say this is an invalid result, even if it's a blowout. A week ago, we were saying, well, if it's a blowout, that won't be the case. He's made it clear that there is going to be an epic fight, a test that this democracy has never had to withstand before about whether or not an election result is valid. And you need to put those two next to each other. When he says stand by, what do you want them to stand by for? You know what he wants them to stand by. And I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. You might love the guy if you're watching this. This is terrible. You cannot say that an election before the votes are even counted. What if he wins? Is he going to say, I'm an illegitimate president because the whole damn thing was fraudulent from the beginning? He's not going to say that. And I don't know how you put restraints around that, because once you get post